It takes a lot for someone to admit that they screwed up, and today that's what this video is all about. So these are the top 5 ways that I up while collecting Hot Toys. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Mr. Mom Collectibles, and I am back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking about the 5 ways that I screwed up when I began collecting Hot Toys and how I corrected those mistakes. But before we get into that, I just want to let you guys know that almost 68% of those watching this video aren't even subscribed to my channel, which is mind-boggling. So how do we correct that? Well, first and foremost, I would really appreciate it if you drop a like on this video. It means the world to me. And also, if you enjoy this and other content, please consider subscribing to the channel. We do have a goal of 3,000 subscribers, and we are marching our way there oh so quickly. And most importantly, please drop a comment below and let me know if you want to contribute to this conversation, and let me know the ways that you screwed up when you started collecting Hot Toys, or when 6-scale figures for that matter. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so the first way that I screwed up when I began collecting Hot Toys is I was trying to complete a specific IP or a line pretty much all the time. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically, when Hot Toys obviously releases figures from a movie or a show, most likely there's going to be more than one character. How many? That's determined by Hot Toys. But earlier on, when I began collecting back in 2020, I had this notion that I felt like I was obligated to get every figure from a specific movie or an IP or something like that. So I would collect things to try to be a completionist. And I learned pretty well after the Mando debacle, which a lot of people credit that back to. I bought a lot of figures from the Mandalorian season 1 and 2. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of figures in my collection that I kind of look back on like, why did I get that? Why did I get that? Because I was trying to complete something that ultimately there's just some figures I kind of fell out of love with. And so that's where I began curating and honestly just picking out specific figures that I like. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be some lines like, for example, Spider-Man No Way Home, where I pretty much got every figure from it, or The Flash for that matter. But then there's other figures or series of figures where I only picked and choose maybe 1 or 2 out of maybe 8 or 9 that I chose to go with. So that was my first mistake, is realizing that, when I was collecting, thinking about trying to complete an entire set, when ultimately I really should never have been doing that to begin with. The second mistake that I made was I was letting my fandom kind of drive a lot of my buying decisions. And obviously, when I say fandom, I mean, obviously, we're a fan of all this stuff. Otherwise, that's part of the reason why we collect Hot Toys or 1/6 scale. But to dive a little bit deeper into the fandom side to it, in terms of like Iron Man, for example, where they make multiple versions of, I was collecting Iron Man suits pretty early on. I have about maybe 7 or 8 Iron Mans total, but my fandom for the character was making me kind of buy up or pre-order a lot of pretty much every version of that character. And realistically, the way that I am now with certain figures like Iron Man, I really just want the original 7 suits, the Hall of Armor, and that's pretty much it. Anything that comes out from Iron Man now, I really am super selective with, which I wasn't before. But I was letting my fandom kind of take over. And even with other figures, I pre-ordered because I thought that I'm a huge fan of that. But when I let time kind of go and kind of thought, sat back and thought about it, maybe the initial announcement or the pre-order gets really excited, but then once that fandom kind of wears off, it's kind of like you kind of do a realization of, do I really need that figure in my collection? So now when I look at stuff, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of everything that I collect, but when it comes to my fandom taking over, do I need multiple versions of this character? Or if I already have one and a new one comes out, what do I do with my display? And not so quick to pre-order things duplicates of. So that's kind of my interpretation of trying to avoid my fandom take over in terms of making, impromptu buying decisions. Now, the next mistake might be an interesting one, but buying way too much from Sideshow. I made a video last summer when I had a credit card dispute issue, and my Sideshow account actually got locked for up to 60 days. And so that really forced me to look at alternate avenues of pre-ordering figures through local comic book shops or other online, locations. And I really opened my eyes in terms of the amount of money for me personally that I was saving going to alternate places aside from Sideshow, whether it be no tax, free shipping, whatever the case may be, lower pricing. I made videos in this in the past when it came to local dealers, because they have limited stock. If they have stuff sitting around, they'll probably discount stuff faster versus things sitting on Sideshow's website. Sideshow is still a great resource. I do still use them for big ticket items, usually vehicles or figures that are $500-600 plus, and I want those payment plans. But definitely my regular pre-orders, that figures that are like $280 or $300, I don't pre-order from Sideshow anymore, just because between tax and shipping, I end up just spending more money in the long run. And for me, I'm really trying to maximize my savings, which allows me to actually backwards collect. So for the amount of money I'm saving on my pre-orders, I'm actually able to use some of those savings to buy older figures that I've missed out on my collection. So that's another mistake, was buying pretty much everything I got from Sideshow, and switching off to that matter and going through like local dealers and stuff like that. Obviously, this is a mistake. Is it a mistake to say the least? Now, the next one may not be a mistake for some people, but it is something that I do have to remember, and that's have patience. At the end of the day, as a collector, if you're new to this game, you may have to come to a realization early on. Is this something that you just plan on being in the long haul for, where you only want to get a couple figures and space them out throughout the year, or depending on how your buying situation is? But for me, patience is very important to have, and it really comes in multitude of ways. Number one, Hot Toys, when we pre-order these figures, we have to wait at least a year, sometimes a year and a half for these figures. And so having patience, really does come a long way, especially having to deal with delays and things like that. And so planning financially is very important to experience these delays. Having patience and maybe not pre-ordering things right away, maybe getting a deal, or recognizing when things are probably going to sit a little longer compared to others. So having patience in this hobby is a very important thing. And it's an ever evolving situation where, no matter how long you've been in the collecting game of Hot Toys, everyone gets impatient once in a while, and you have to kind of take a step back and remember, patience ultimately is going to be your friend. A lot of people will day one pre-order figures and spend more money to get things day one early, when I personally don't do that. So I just think that patience is just something that's good for us to kind of remember and hone in on, for this hobby, especially if it's something that you're going to be in the long haul for. But for me, patience is always something that I got to remember myself to have in more ways than one, especially when it comes to collecting Hot Toys and 1/6 scale items. And a big mistake of mine that I really stopped doing is day one pre-ordering too much. Probably last year, even the year before, anytime something came out that I even remotely had interest in, I day one pre-ordered it. Came out, Monday morning, saw an announcement, went up on Sideshow, pre-ordered it. Now I don't day one pre-order pretty much anything. What I do is I give things at least a 1 week rule for the most part, where if something comes out and it's announced, I do not pre-order it for the first at least minimum week. What that does for me is I realize that after a couple days of an announcement or something like that, my opinions usually change on it sometimes, where I realize, like, maybe I was so hyped up on something when it came out, my mentality or my opinion might change a week later. So that really does go factor into the idea of, if I'm going to pre-order something. And obviously with day one pre-ordering, a lot of collectors like to collect NRDs, and honestly, putting down an NRD on something doesn't mean anything until the invoice is fully paid. And so that was a problem that I had about 2 years ago, when I was racking up a lot of NRDs, and then you ultimately have to cancel stuff sometimes, and that's just money you're throwing away. So for me, not day one pre-ordering really kind of helped me out. I'm not saying I still don't pre-order stuff. It's just that I give myself a little more time to kind of think about the decision. More like, for example, the Balin figure from Ahsoka. That's a figure that I've said numerous times I really wanted. I still haven't pre-ordered yet at the time of making this video. It is something I will pre-order, but I just want to kind of give it a couple days. It's not going anywhere right away, and decide, do I really want this figure? Ultimately, it's going to be something I'm going to pre-order, but I didn't day one pre-order it just because I want, like I said, give myself that 1 week rule of kind of letting that sink in and deciding on if that really is the figure for me that I want, which it ultimately is. So that's my fifth kind of mistake that I did, that I kind of corrected, which was day one pre-ordering way too much. So just to kind of recap this video real fast, I just want to go back through the 5 points. So my number one was trying to complete a specific IP or line, pretty much buying everything to complete something that ultimately there's just figures in there that I had no use for. Number two is letting fandom drive some buying decisions. Like I said, we're fans of everything, but sometimes, we take it a little too far in buying excess, multiple figures, army building, or just multiple things that we ultimately don't need. So that's something that, I had to really kind of hone in on. The third one, I should say, is buying way too much from Sideshow. Like I said, looking local, other sources, finding deals, saving money. That was just the better way for me. That personally, I still do pre-order from Sideshow, like I said, but I don't nearly do it as much as I used to. Remembering to have patience, that's pretty straightforward. As patient as we have to be, we're always impatient when it comes to these things, but we have to do better at that. And then finally, day one pre-ordering way too much, losing out on NRDs you ultimately are going to probably cancel on. For me, I give myself at least a week, maybe even a little more, to decide if I ultimately want that figure. So like there you have it. Those are 5 ways that I feel that I kind of screwed up when I started pre-ordering Hot Toys and buying Hot Toys back in 2020. Some of these mistakes I've even made up to last year, even this year. So I'm always evolving as a collector. I don't pretend to be perfect. Nobody is. Perfection doesn't exist in my eyes. But there you have it. Like I said, let me know in the comments below what mistakes you made, buying Hot Toys. We all make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great to admit them. And, the fact is, if you, drop a comment below, that's something else that a newer collector can go in and look at and maybe learn from our mistakes. That's the most important thing, is learning from our mistakes. But until then, guys, like I said, thank you so much for watching. Like I said, drop a like on this video and please consider subscribing to the channel if this is in fact your first time, and drop a comment below. And this is Mr. Mom Collectibles, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.